The music echoed through the grand hall, blending with the laughter and chatter of the wedding guests. Strings of fairy lights twinkled above, casting a soft glow over the dance floor where couples swayed in rhythm. But amidst the joyful celebration, Sarah felt her heart constrict, her mind far away from the happiness that surrounded her. It was her sister's wedding, a day of love and new beginnings, yet for Sarah, it felt like the end of something, though she couldn't quite place it. She had been married to Peter for 5 years, and they had built a life together, a steady, predictable life. But as she stood at the edge of the ballroom, sipping champagne and watching the festivities, something inside her shifted, and then, as if conjured by her thoughts, she saw him. David. Her breath caught in her throat as their eyes locked from across the room. He hadn't changed much, though the years had added a touch of maturity to his features. The same sharp jawline, the same piercing eyes that had once made her heart race. Sarah hadn't seen David in years, not since they had broken things off before she met Peter. He was her first love, the one she thought she'd marry, but life had taken them in different directions. Or maybe she had taken a safer path. David smiled, a slow, knowing smile that brought a rush of memories flooding back. The late-night conversations, the stolen kisses, the passion that had burned so fiercely between them. And now, here he was, a guest at her sister's wedding, pulling her back into a past she had long buried. As the night wore on, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. She tried to focus on Peter, who was happily chatting with the other groomsmen, completely unaware of the turmoil brewing inside her. But her thoughts kept drifting back to David. She didn't seek him out, at least, not consciously, but when they crossed paths near the bar, it felt inevitable. "Sarah," David said, his voice smooth and familiar. "I didn't expect to see you here." She smiled, but her heart was pounding. "I could say the same." For a moment, they stood in silence, the noise of the wedding fading into the background. Sarah could feel the tension between them, thick and palpable. She knew this was dangerous. Reconnecting with David was like playing with fire. But there was a part of her, a part she had long suppressed, that craved the heat. They exchanged polite pleasantries, talking about their lives, their careers, how time had passed so quickly. But beneath the surface, something unspoken simmered between them. When David mentioned he was staying at the hotel nearby, Sarah felt a thrill run through her. She pushed the thought away, reminding herself that she was married, that she had made a commitment to Peter. But when David leaned in, his voice low, and said, "I've missed you," the words sent a shiver down her spine. The rest of the evening felt like a blur. Sarah couldn't focus on anything: her sister's laughter, the clinking of glasses, even Peter's affectionate gestures felt distant. She was consumed by the memories of David, the way he had once made her feel alive, reckless, free. As the night wound down and the guests began to leave, Sarah found herself lingering by the exit. Peter was busy helping with the cleanup, and her family was preoccupied with seeing off the bride and groom. It was then that David approached her once more. "Walk with me," he asked softly. Sarah hesitated, her mind screaming at her to say no, but her body seemed to have a will of its own. She nodded. They walked outside into the cool night air, the noise of the wedding fading into the background. The hotel grounds were quiet, illuminated only by soft garden lights. They strolled in silence for a while, the tension between them building with every step. Finally, David stopped, turning to face her. "I never stopped thinking about you," he confessed, his eyes searching hers. "You were always the one I let get away." Sarah's breath hitched. She had dreamed of hearing those words once upon a time, but now they felt like a dangerous temptation. Her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. She loved Peter, didn't she? She had a good life, a stable marriage. But David, he represented the passion, the intensity she had long suppressed. "I can't do this," she whispered, though her body betrayed her as she stepped closer to him. David reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You don't have to," he said softly. "But I know you want to." His words lingered in the air, pulling her in. And in that moment, everything she had built with Peter seemed to slip away, replaced by the intoxicating pull of her past. Before she could stop herself, she leaned in, their lips meeting in a kiss that reignited everything they once had. The next morning, Sarah woke up in her hotel room, her heart heavy with guilt. She had slipped away from David before things went any further, but the kiss had been enough. It was a betrayal, no matter how small. She had crossed a line she never thought she would. Peter, blissfully unaware, was still asleep beside her. She stared at him, her heart aching with the weight of what she had done. How could she have let herself get swept up in the moment? How could she betray the man who had been nothing but good to her? But as much as she regretted the kiss, part of her couldn't forget the way it had made her feel the rush, the thrill, the passion that had been missing from her life for so long. It was as if a part of her had awakened, one that had been dormant for years. The days following the wedding were tense. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that somehow Peter would find out. She distanced herself from him, afraid that her guilt would betray her. Peter noticed the change, of course. He asked if everything was okay, if she was upset about something, but Sarah brushed it off, blaming it on post-wedding exhaustion. But the guilt festered inside her, eating away at the foundation of their marriage. She began to pull away from Peter emotionally, her mind constantly drifting back to David. She told herself it was just a momentary lapse, a mistake she would never repeat. But the pull of her past was too strong. And then, one evening, everything came crashing down. Peter had found her phone. She had been careless, leaving it unlocked on the kitchen counter. He had seen the messages between her and David, the flirtation, the confession of the kiss, the lingering desire that hadn't fully faded away. When Sarah came home that night, Peter was waiting for her, his face pale, his hands shaking. "Who is David?" he asked, his voice quiet but filled with hurt. Sarah's heart dropped. She could see the pain in his eyes, the disbelief. She had never seen him look so broken. "It was nothing," she stammered, tears welling up in her eyes. "It was a mistake." Peter shook his head, his voice cracking. "A mistake? You kissed him, Sarah. You lied to me. How could you?" The weeks that followed were a blur of pain and regret. Peter couldn't forgive her, not completely. The trust that had once held their marriage together was shattered, and no matter how hard Sarah tried to fix things, it was clear that they had reached a breaking point. David, too, faded back into the background of her life, a fleeting moment of passion that left destruction in its wake. In the end, Sarah was left standing alone, her marriage in ruins, her past haunting her at every turn. She had thought she could balance both worlds, the steady, predictable life she had built with Peter and the thrilling, passionate memories of her past with David. But in the end, she lost both, left with nothing but the echoes of what could have been.